Okay, you got my ceiling and my floor. I'll tell you, this camera gets more and more flaky each time. Hello and welcome, everyone. Let's start off with a question. I'm sure you've all seen this, yeah? A coffee cup, right? Because I tend to lug it around, especially during meetings. Helps to keep the voice warm, yeah? What can you tell about me? Well, first of all, have you seen this cup before? Have you even noticed that this is generally, not always, but generally the one that attends these Eminent Way meetings? Have you noticed?
Is it the Rocky Mountains, Pierce?
Yeah, it is. It's probably got in a Colorado gift shop somewhere by the looks of it, but I don't recall where it came from. What can you tell about me, though, based on this cup? You see, let's assume that your powers of observation have been completely sharp over the last many times that we've met. And you've realized that almost invariably, this is the cup that comes to the Eminent Way meetings with me. What can you tell about me based on that?
A man of regularity.
Maybe. Keep going. There's not going to be a wrong answer, okay? There will be some right answers, but there won't be any wrong ones, if that makes sense.
I also noticed it's a sizable cup.
Sizable cup? What does that say?
A man of full measure.
Okay, right. So detection starting to switch on. This is good. This is a good exercise. I'm trying to help warm up the faculties a little bit today. Yeah? What about the way it's sitting right now? Can you see it? Huh? Is it too far out?
Maybe just a little.
Just a little? It's right here. Can't see it. I can't zoom in any further, unfortunately. Tell you what, I will bring it up exactly as it was setting, okay? In the exact posture that it was setting. All right, now can you see it? Oops, hold on. See, this is weird. I have to get my face in because now can you see it? Which side is the handle on?
It's on your right.
It's on my right. What does that say about me? Because when you go to set down, assuming that you hold it right by the handle, when you go to set down a coffee cup, if you're right-handed, it's going to be turning one way. If you're left-handed, it's going to be turning the other way, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you can abstract that and you can say, okay, right, Pierce is right-handed. Help me out, folks.
Left brain orientated, maybe?
Perhaps.
Positive stance.
Keep going. This is good for you. Good for the faculties. Let me ask you this. Do I own another cup? It's a good question.
It's either the same or you don't.
It's either the same cup, always.
Similar looking cup,
right?
Or you
right.
Or you own another one that looks exactly the same way. I don't think you own something, or maybe this is your favorite cup.
Now let me ask you this. Well, okay, right. Maybe that's my favorite cup. Now let me tell you something odd. Had we met yesterday, it would have been a different cup. Do you know why? What can you make of that? It would have been the other one that you tend to see, which is the blue one with sort of red flowers on it.
Dishwasher day.
Keep going.
Maybe.
Now you're getting there. Keep going. Dishwasher day. See, in this household, because of how many people are milling about on a regular basis, we tend to wash the dishes every day. Now, do you think when I pop out of bed and take care of my morning business, that the first thing I go do is empty the dishwasher, or the first thing I go do is fill a coffee cup?
Do you empty the dishwasher? I thought that's your kid's job. No.
If I waited for that, it would be noon.
Coffee then. Yeah, it's still coffee because you're like, well, coffee, but then you realize there are no cups, so maybe
What do
you
I,
go.
what do I do first, right? What do I do first? What can you deduce from this? See, Sachin, you said dishwasher day because you were really close to the right track. There's actually two cups that I prefer. And you just happen to be stuck on the cycle of the odd days, right? If you consider what the blue cup is the even days and this Colorado cup is the odd days. Because we meet every seventh day, you're stuck on the odd day, aren't you? Right? And so you always get the same cup from your perspective, you see, because I don't empty the dishwasher when I first get up. I actually do that at six on the dot. Yeah. And yeah, I pour myself a cup of coffee, make coffee first, comes out of the cupboard, right? And so had we met yesterday or tomorrow, you'd see the blue cup. Now, the reason why I'm going into this is because this is the kind of mindset that you need to have when you approach something like the laws. And we're going to spend the next several weeks talking about the laws. We're going to do kind of a nice, easy introduction to the law of three today, even though you've had it several times. But yeah, this is the kind of mindset that you need when you approach the laws. You need to be able to look at something and go past the initial observation of it to what it says about something, to what then it says about what it says. In other words, going deeper and deeper and deeper into the core. Through your faculties, with a little bit of help, you were able to come to the idea that that I have two cups, which you would have seen because we've also met on Saturdays before. Generally, if you go back and look at Saturday videos, you'll see a different cup. But so you would know that I have two cups that I prefer. We actually have several more, but I don't like them as much for various physical reasons. Do you see? It's like information is hiding in everything. Now, Knight, how's your physics?
Reasonable.
Reasonable. How's your quantum mechanics and quantum physics and all that good stuff?
Very, very weak. Very lacking.
Right? Yeah, everyone's is. There's probably one or two people on the planet at any given point in time that really kind of almost get it sometimes. Yeah, they have those aha moments. But what do you know? What do you know about the idea of information in the universe?
Information in the universe.
Yeah, what is information?
Well, we touched on it last week, didn't we? When we spoke about a light photon.
Oh, right.
Being a carrier of information.
A carrier, right.
That has no, or we can deduce it has no past, present, or future.
Let me ask you a question then. Does a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte or 10 terabyte hard drive weigh more than one that is quantumly erased? Because see, here's the problem, right? Because when you erase a hard drive, unless you have a true, well, you can't even get away from the idea of information, right? Because even if you have a true source of randomness, it is still contains the information about what those random numbers were when it was being erased, you see? But quantum erasure, in other words, a zero state on the quantum level. Does a hard drive, 1 terabyte hard drive, weigh more when it's written to than a quantumly erased hard drive? Does it?
I would have said they all weigh the same.
You would think so.
Yeah, you think so.
You would think so, but they don't.
Oh.
Information has mass.
Okay.
This is something that's been talked about in the fourth way for, what, 100 years now. And it's been known in the origins of the fourth way for basically forever. This has to do with the idea that esoteric information, in fact, everything is quantifiable in our universe, including esoteric knowledge. Yeah, so there's really only so much of it to go around, which is why if you start to Google things and read books and all of this type of thing, you're really going to get something very diluted, because it can't exceed the limit of mass. You see, it weighs something. It is a physical substance. I'm talking about information. I have a theory. I don't know if it's testable. It certainly isn't testable in my little lab. But I think if you erase a hard drive, or even change the contents of a hard drive, that it's probably emitting photons, more than likely, because photons carry information. You see, carries information about the state that it was in before. And those photons probably strike the edge, turn into heat, and some of the entropy of the universe is altered in our local environment they're in. Right? Why am I going down this? Because again, this ties into how you have to approach the laws. You can't just go read books about it. You can't just go study what other people have come to with regards to the laws. It can help get you in the territory, but if you want to add to your being, add to the essence of you, add to those B influences and C influences inside of you, you need to connect to something somewhere in the universe where that matter has not reached the planet yet. Okay. Now, scientists have this huge puzzle, don't they, about dark energy and dark matter. They say that when they look up at the heavens and they look up at the way that stars are attracted towards one another, there's a huge discrepancy. That discrepancy is that there would seem to be more matter and more energy in the universe than what we're able to perceive, than what we're able to see, visibly locate. And for lack of better terms and expressions, they have they coined it dark energy and dark matter. Now, go back to the idea of photons. All right, photons are the carriers of information. A photon is a massless particle. It's a boson, right? Instead of a fermion. Fermion are the massy particles. Yeah, photons are bosons. They don't have mass. They're everywhere, all at the same time, not just from a mathematical standpoint, but in reality, because as we talked about before, photons experience neither time nor space. So the moment it's created, and the moment it bounces into something or bounces off of something or gets partially absorbed into something or fully absorbed, is the same moment in time for it, and it traveled no distance. But what it did impart was information about its source, yeah, in the form of heat, usually. So I propose, and this isn't an eminent way teaching, this is just me working my faculties towards, my understanding of the laws and the universe, that if information has mass, which science is beginning to agree with, some are on the fence, some say no, many are saying yes at this point in time, but if information has mass, then that means that the acquisition of it, if you can pull it in from a rarefied place, would probably be that dark energy or dark matter of the universe. Yeah? That's where you get the new insights, the new enlightenment from. And so really, when you connect to something, when you begin to add these types of things up, it's really hard to say this is my adding up or this is something I've come to. It's more like something you connect to. It's more like something that you're in receipt of because of the type of process that you're entertaining. You're attracting that photon being everywhere simultaneously and nowhere. Finds a resonance in you and processes through you. Okay, now do understand that this is, I think someone watching this might accuse me of being pseudoscientific. Yeah, and that's okay, because it's a process. It's not like I'm out trying to lecture in, a college about my addings up on quantum physics and quantum mechanics and information and all of this type of stuff. What we're after is something a bit more core than that. So pardon the pseudoscience, okay, because it's not my job to be a professional physicist in this. It's my job to try to get you to think in new ways, okay? So am I forgiven for that? Yeah. Okay, good. Right. So anyway, that's a bit of my wind into today. As I said, I wanted to discuss in a bit more detail the law of three. Now, you know, this is kind of odd and peculiar, isn't it? But there are three fundamental laws in the universe, and we've talked about these before. There's the law of unity, represented by the circle in the Enneagram. There's the law of Trinity, for following the itties, law of Trinity, or the law of three, represented by the triangle in the diagram. And then the law of septenary, the law of seven, the 6 points on the inner circle in there. And I guess the fundamental understanding is that everything in the universe exists as a result of three forces coming together. This active, passive, and neutralizing force. They all converge at the same time. So take the concept of space and time. Okay, we'll leave the third one out for a moment. Matter. Yeah, we'll leave the third one out. But space and time. Out of those two, which would be passive and which would be active? Do you suppose?
Pierce, what do you mean by active or passive?
Well, the active force, right? The moving one. The I guess I just gave it away.
I mean space, but I was like active space.
Time, actually, right?
Space,
time
active,
is the one that's moving.
Hmm.
Okay, granted, our universe appears to be expanding. Okay, and space is getting wider, but it's still static. If you assume that that's true, because science thinks it is, it's not like if I were to go up to my coffee cup, I would have to walk twice as far because space has expanded. I'm expanding along with it. Okay, so forget, you can kind of rule that out. It takes the same amount of steps to get to my cup as it did 10 minutes ago. All right, even if space is possibly expanding. There could be another reason for that, but that seems to be a very static condition, doesn't it? From here to Hampstead-on-Heath or London or whatever is going to take the same distance today as it will 5 years from now, hopefully. Continental drift aside. Can always get a little too technical. Yeah, so time would be the active participant, space, the static or the negative vector, right, on our triangle, and then matter, energy, and information would be the third. It just depends on how you look at it. Why I say matter, energy, and information is because they're all the same thing. I mean, Einstein said that E equals mc squared, and I suppose, which is basically saying that energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Yeah, energy and mass are on two sides of the seesaw, the teeter-totter. They're the same thing. You know, they weigh the same, or they are the same, I should say. It's just one's in a different state from another. And now we throw in this idea that information also has mass. You would have to say, you could rewrite the formula that I equals mc squared, or the square root of the speed of light, over, you get it, yeah. Knight, you can rearrange that formula if you want to. Let me see. Are you used to thinking in these terms? Have you thought about the law of three this way? Be honest, have you thought about the law of three this way?
Not in terms of the universe, no.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go into why.
I think when I've looked at it before and looked at it more recently, I've tried to identify examples nearer to home.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I think if it's a cosmic law, if it's a universal law, it will turn up at all levels. And so I think what you're saying is perfectly valid.
It does turn up at all levels, but here's an important point to get. It turns up differently, or at least it appears differently at different levels. All right. We've gone through this idea of the ray of creation. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and do. Okay, being the ray of creation. Excuse it's kind of hard to write with the table here. I'll probably have to move it at some point. At this world, we say we have 3 laws, right? And you can think of those 3 laws potentially as time, space, and matter, energy, information. That would be the law of 3 at the level C, or the universal level in the ray of creation. All right, but then when you get down to here to law, it has 3 of its own, which would also be equivalent to time, space, and matter. Plus it adds 3 of its own. I mean, it inherits, I should say, it inherits the laws above it, plus adds 3 of its own. Okay, so we call this world 6. Yeah, at the level of soul, or our sun, it inherits the 6 laws. It inherits the 3 laws from the first world, the 6 from the second, and adds 3 of its own. Thus we have world 12. And this keeps going and going, but understand that at each level, this is an important point to get. At each level, it still is the same fundamental 3 laws, but whatever it inherits from above it has a different look to it. Now, let me give you an example. You know, from your grade school, I suppose, right? Your young years, that the sun is not a flat disk in the sky. Yeah, it's a globe. But we don't see it that way, do we? We don't look up at the sun, or even the moon for that matter, although we can get a little bit better definition on that. We only see it as kind of a flat surface up there. We've lost 1 dimension of its dimensionality. Right? You have 3 dimensions, would be a sphere, 2 would be a plane, which is how we see it, and 1 would be a point, right? Which is essentially how we see stars or even other galaxies that completely disappear, because a point doesn't exist mathematically, or at least it can't exist in physical space. Yeah, has no dimensionality, but it still exists, doesn't it? Every world, here's an important concept, every world is 3-dimensional unto itself. When you go up a world, you lose 1 element of that dimensionality. When you go up another, you lose another. All right. When you go down, it's the same thing in the microscopic worlds. Well, even starting at something like looking at under a microscope, you already begin to lose that dimensionality. You see surfaces, don't you? You don't see the interior of something. But how do I explain this? You sense yourself 3-dimensionally. Everything else around you, you sense 2-dimensionally, right? If you look around your surroundings, all you're really seeing is surfaces. Now, because you have 2 eyes, you're getting 2 perspectives on that surface. But if you close one, and don't try this, but don't close one eye and go for a drive, but maybe close one eye and go for a walk, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Everything becomes surfaces. All right. Yeah. And you can't judge how far away you are. You don't know when you're actually, when you're actually going to touch something. Try it. Seriously, everyone close one eye, pick an object nearby, and start going towards it until you can touch it. You notice that moment of hesitation where you're a bit unsure? Like, is it here yet? Is it here yet? There it is, right? Suddenly you make contact with it. Now, with both eyes, you can certainly do that, but that's only because you're getting two-dimensional information from two different sources. And so your brain is able to extrapolate this idea that it's three-dimensional. But it's not. Well, it is. It is in and of itself, but it's not to you. You understand the perspective? Yeah. Animals with like horses, right, with eyes primarily on the sides of their head, live in two worlds simultaneously. Did you know? If you're riding your horse, yeah, because we all have them here in America. It's the wild, wild west, isn't it? When you're out riding your horse, as we do here in America, right, Sachin? We all have horses. It's a
We
joke.
all have horses.
We all have horses, right? And
yeah,
six
in
shooters
cars.
at our sides.
Yeah.
When you're out riding your horse and it gets spooked by something, yeah, you have to calm it down, and then you have to take it, turn it around, and walk it past it again on this side, because when you come back along the trail and it sees it with the other eye, it's going to get freaked out all over again because it didn't get that information over here. You see? So good thing you're not a horse, right? Because I'd have to work twice as hard with you. Yeah. Okay. Thought? Knight, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I think this is certainly very original for me to consider what the law of three actually is doing at different levels.
It's doing the same thing. It's
Yes.
just you don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Right. If you get a solar event here on the planet, it's going to look like a miracle.
Right.
The reason why is because it. Do I have a sheet of paper? Unfortunately, I don't. Okay. I think it was actually Ouspensky. Might have been Nickel, but Ouspensky that came up with this analogy. He had a sheet of paper, yeah, and he imagined that is our universe, our environment, okay, your ecology. Something from a higher dimension, in other words, something sun level, enters into it. It's going to do so at a different vector, okay? So if you live, I'm using a piece of chalk here. If you live on this surface, what you're going to see is suddenly a hole open up in your world, yeah? Travel through, having this kind of expansion, and then close up immediately. Thank you so much. Paper. Now we have one next time. Thank you. Right? So you let's see. You're trying to find me, aren't you? So yeah, you live in this kind of environment where you're two-dimensional. Something from a higher dimension, 3 dimensions, enters your world. It's going to look like a miracle because it's going to expand around you and then suddenly disappear, kind of like an angel. Yeah, something that just appears and disappears out of nowhere. Now, as this lower dimension being, right, that lives on a sheet of paper, doesn't know height and depth, as a lower dimensional being, you can't see this aspect of it. And this is the reason, Knight, why we are generally third force blind, because the planet is under 48 laws, but we are not. Do you know how many laws we're under, generally speaking?
As human beings.
You personally. Not you specifically, but you as a person, you as a human on this planet. How many laws are you under in the scheme of the ray of creation? If you're going off your old demon training, you'll get it wrong.
How many laws are we under?
Huh?
How many laws are we under?
Yeah. $96. You're under 96, and the reason why is because you are a part of organic life on the planet.
Right. Okay.
Okay. We don't have a moon. What we have is culture. I mean, we have a moon, but really the moon belongs more to the planet than it does to us, right?
Okay.
The moon doesn't orbit us, does it? We orbit, so it kind of throws things off, right? We orbit organic life, or even humanity, you can say. Right? Hopefully we're not under 192 laws. But we orbit organic life on the planet. Organic life orbits the planet, you see. The planet orbits well, is a member of our solar system, which orbits the sun, and so on and so forth. All right, so think of how many orders of restrictions that we're under. It's not like you can, well, unless you're an astronaut, I suppose, maybe they suddenly come under a different set of laws organically anyway, but it's not like you can leave the human race, or leave the realms of organic life. Now, someone should have stopped me and said, yes, you can, Pierce. Can you? Isn't that what this journey is all about? Listen.
Yeah, so as we develop, we should be susceptible to less laws.
Right. You know the story of the sword in the stone, King Arthur?
Yes.
The esoteric meaning behind that?
Yes.
You do?
He must have had access to some special electrical force to release the gold containment on the sword.
Yeah, the binding, right?
Yeah, and his development must have given him that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, well, it looks like a miracle, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
This is allegorical, obviously, for the process of being able to invoke this kind of plastic mediator, which is a condition of solar life, right? This non-corporeal aspect, to be able to, invoke that plastic mediator into the stone and be able to pull the sword out of it, right? Which is something physically impossible if it's part of the stone.
Yes.
Sword in the stone anagrams to the words in the notes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Yeah. Anyway, right. But this is the idea of what a personal development journey is extricating yourself from greater and greater dominions of control. Yeah. Do you agree or disagree? Are you in a position to agree or disagree, I guess?
It's obvious that certain people in history have cut loose.
Cut loose.
For want of a better phrase. And so they've reached for things and gained access to things with their enhanced faculties. And it would make sense that that they become unfettered by less laws. That would make sense. So the more you're able to do that, the greater possibilities you have, having been to less laws. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea, all esotericism and occultism and other isms aside, the idea of human evolution is really, we're at a conscious phase. Perhaps in the eons before, we were at physical phases, but now we're at a conscious phase. This body does what it was intended to do, for the most part. A little creakety as you get old, but because the creak and ache, doesn't it, Knight? Yeah, a little bit here.
It certainly does.
Certainly does, yeah. But the next phase of evolution for the human is a conscious evolution. But what that really implies is freeing yourself from what are called A influences. A influences, listen, we've talked about this, haven't we, right? How the thinking faculty works in polarity. The thinking faculty, the mind, it works in polarity. Compare and contrast, yes, no, right, left, right, wrong, up, down, okay? Everything is a comparison with it. Do you see that it is absolutely engineered to follow A influences? Do you remember the lesson on A influences? All right, we drew a circle and we said, for every A influence, always comes in pairs. All right, they may not be localized, but every A influence is going in a random direction and it has a pair somewhere. So a person can become accidentally rich or accidentally poor. They can become, accidentally intelligent or accidentally dullards, right? It just sort of depends. And generally speaking, if your life happens to be located in this vector, you don't see it because you see some A influences going this way and some going this way. Of course, there's thousands, right? But I'm talking just a generalism here. So you think, oh, I'm a relatively successful person, but you were just accidentally put here, right? You could have accidentally been put, here where you've got other influences going around. You see, it's the law of accident. Yeah, it's not success. It's an illusion in that regard. Success comes from magnetizing yourself, and this is not a thinking thing. Obviously, the mind has its use. I'm not saying stop thinking and do something else, but to attract B influences to oneself is going to require non-dualistic thinking. Yeah. So you're extracting yourself from those A influences, putting yourself in a B influence, which is magnetizing in a certain direction. That is an elevation from the laws, because if you're no longer susceptible to the law of accident, then you can be more directive towards your future, can't you?
Yeah, can I ask something there, Pish? You mentioned something there that I didn't pick up on 2 weeks ago. You mentioned they appear in pairs.
Oh yeah, sure.
That's fascinating. Is that because when something arrives here, it splits into two? Is that related to this, or
it has a male-female aspect to it? Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, or a polarity aspect to it.
Yeah.
This has to do with where our brain is situated on the cosmic scale of things, where you've got the physical cross here, but the brain, being an electrical entity, gets this idea of apparent opposites when really they're adjacent. They're adjacent to one another. Yeah, that's the idea. But yeah, B influences all go the same way. A influences go every which way, but they're always equally and oppositely opposed, okay, when they appear here. If you want to put it in terms of physics, then you could say a photon gets split into 2 photons of lesser frequency. This is how B influences become A influences, actually.
Okay. Very interesting.
Yeah, now I want to correct something, because it's absolutely vital in the process of conscious evolution for yourself. I want to correct this idea that you have to struggle and fight against A influences. They're stronger than you, okay? You can't do it. It's fighting a giant, all right? All the hero tales aside, that's not the way that you do that. If you pit yourself against A influences, in other words, have this strong stance of, this is right and this is wrong and this type of thing, what's going to happen is the law of accident will come to crush you, literally, okay? Or not figuratively, I should say, not literally. You won't crush. But the weight of that, the weight of what is in the astral light with regard to A influences, is stronger than undeveloped you. All right. So instead, we follow the path of the sly person, all right, the way of the sly man. And we acknowledge the A influences as they come, gain and loss, right? Yeah, bumps in the road of your career, bumps in the road of your, family life, bumps in the road of your education. These types of things come along, you acknowledge them. Right, there it is. But stay in your B influences. Keep that as your center. This is why I said a couple of weeks ago that it's absolutely imperative that you begin to understand A influences versus B influences. that you begin to be able to know which is which. We'll get to the pseudo B influences at some point in time, how to detect those. Yeah, but yeah, do you understand why that's so important now? If you go against it, you lean upon that which resists you, right?
Yeah.
And you become what you think about. Those are two very fundamental laws. If you're constantly thinking about struggling against, it's going to come and influence you and infest you. Yeah? And you'll end up worse off than if you had never started a personal development journey whatsoever.
Right. So is it better to invest in that which you wish to be with more and let the others wither naturally rather than fight?
Yeah, don't fight it. Don't fight it. Yeah.
Okay.
A wise man will not fight it. A wise man will put himself in the higher.
Yes. Yeah.
Put himself in B influences. A influences are going to happen. It's not like, just because you collect a bunch of B influences all going one particular direction, that A influences aren't going to still be in the ecology of the planet. It's just that you're no longer as susceptible to them.
Yeah.
Then you get into what's called the law of fate, right? Which we talked about a little bit. Okay. And let's clear up some terminology. Do you mind this? This is more of a ramble about the law of three because I'm not ready to go hard at it yet. Yeah?
This
We
is
just
good.
gotta get in the territory first. Yeah? So that's what today is about. We'll as you get more acumen in the law of 3 and 7 and unity and all this type of stuff, then we can go a bit harder at it. But right now it's just let's get in the territory. Okay.
Yeah, this is good.
Con, C-O-N. Right. This was talked a lot about in the Eminent. I don't think it was ever explained. Carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen is what it was said. Yeah. These sorts of things. It's a hangover from the origins of the fourth way teachings. All right, which kind of became a very strong foundation in the Eminent, and still is in the Eminent way. Right. The fourth way but the fourth way's foundation is alchemy. You see, what Gurdjieff did, and I've talked about this before, but I'll reiterate this. What Gurdjieff did was take alchemy that was preserved in the Eastern Orthodox, primarily, that's where he got it from, although it's elsewhere as well. But take this idea of alchemy and put it into more modern scientific terms. Okay. And so Gurdjieff talked about carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, but what he was really talking about was three forces: positive, negative, and neutral. All right, that would be also a Gurdjieffism. Or in alchemy, let's see, how does this go now? Let me think. You've got water for oxygen, you've got earth for carbon, and air for nitrogen. Right, and so if you read these alchemical texts, when they're talking about air, earth, and water, not fire yet, but air, earth, and water, then it's the same thing as Gurdjieff talking about carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen, or positive, negative, and neutral. Okay, and this will help unlock, if you're into these alchemical texts, it will help unlock that. Now, in the Emin, it was always like contemplation, and you would break out this carbon, oxygen, nitrogen from templation, and consideration, and con this and con that, construct, all of these sorts of things.
In a minute.
Huh?
Oh, sorry, Piers. I thought the microphone was off. Apologies.
No worries. Right. And what really the implication behind that is that we're talking about a balanced, something that can appear in our universal structure. Yeah, this CON. All three forces are present. So then it's almost like, take the word contemplation, right? You assume, right, this exists. This is from the domain of the law of three, con. So then you ask yourself, what is templation? Do you understand? This is the groundwork. This is the foundation of the groundwork of it.
Yes.
I hope it helps, for those of you that were Emin members before, I hope it helps to get an actual explanation of what that means.
Yeah. Piers, Leo also said in one of the papers that carbon is the building blocks of the universe.
Yeah, it's Earth.
Oxygen,
Right.
Oxygen is the debilitation,
Sure.
and nitrogen is the extinction. Okay.
I would have to question him on what he means by that. He probably did mean something specific, and it's probably accurate, but I wouldn't put those words with it necessarily. Then again, I'm not Leo. Yeah, certainly you can put it that way, right?
So
because
why use CON in the first place? Why not just stick with positive, negative, and neutral?
it's a Gurdjieffism. It's a Gurdjieffism. Okay, listen, Gurdjieff came around at the turn of the century. This was a time on the heels of the Industrial Revolution where everyone was looking away from God and looking towards science. All right, now, when Gurdjieff was in Mount Athos, chatting with Telvant and those other fellas, he got it in the wholly affirming, wholly denying, and wholly reconciling, or the Father and the Son and the Holy Ghost, or those types of terms. Later, same place, he got it in terms of earth, water, and air. Because it was containing this idea, this alchemical knowledge was contained within the church at the time. But when he went to present it to the world was all about science and chemistry and Newtonian physics and all of these types of things. And so he goes, right, same thing, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. Okay, nothing else to it than that. It was a rebranding of an ancient concept for modern ears. That's it. All right, no more significance than that.
Other than CON is a very common prefix.
Sure. Definitely. Shows the house from which it comes. Right, it comes from the house of the law of three. Anytime you see that CON. And of course, hydrogen is fire. Gurdjieff talks about hydrogens a lot. You've got H12, and when I was a young man in the Eminent, I thought H12 was like yellow number 5, right? Some sort of dye that you use. Like you read the ingredients on something, it's got corn syrup and monosodium blah blah blahs and and yellow number 5 dye. Right? I thought that's what H12 was because no one ever explained to me what was meant by hydrogens. Now, do you know what's meant by a hydrogen?
Is it to do with the smallest particle possible?
Yeah, it's energy. Okay, it's energy. Let's take it from the example of octaves for a moment. My degree is in electrical engineering. One of my degrees anyway is in electrical engineering. And it really, I had the opportunity to teach for a while, teach, as a teacher's assistant, basically, teach electrical engineering to like first and second year students. And I always found that water was the easiest way to teach a concept, right? I would be describing something like a transistor, which has 3 legs to it. A transistor does, it's this doped silicone is what they call it. But basically, the way that you describe a transistor is you've got a pipe going in, you've got a water tap on top and a pipe going out, okay? And then you've got someone that can do this to the water tap, all right? And so if you turn it this way, it barely trickles through. If you turn it this way, it goes through much faster. Now, you add let's see. You add someone to tickle you so that you're constantly doing this, and then you can create a frequency if you're going back and forth, the whole time. You can create a frequency, a ripple in something that would normally be a direct current. But the idea that water has analogies to electricity is really fundamentally this concept of hydrogen, because hydrogen is barely here, all right? It is the smallest physical element possible in a planetary or even in a solar ecology for that matter, okay? Smallest physical element. It doesn't even have a neutron, believe it or not. What it uses as a neutron comes from the octave before, comes from the realms of force and power. I suppose we would call it the strong, weak nuclear force and electromagnetic force in modern terms, but that's where it derives its power from. That's where it derives its neutralization from. You know, a hydrogen atom is one proton with one electron. This is a terrible way to do it. I should say one electron because it's a cloud, isn't it? But one proton with one electron. Yeah, that's it. Where's the neutron? It's in the octave before. Okay, so what this demonstrates, and the reason why I brought up electricity and water is because you could kind of say that electricity is the water of the next octave up. Do you understand? Has the same behavior. To us, it looks completely different and acts completely different, right? You never got zapped by water, did you? Hopefully. But if you lived in the octave down, in one octave down, then water would electrocute you, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well,
too energetic.
Electricity flows, and it's
just like
measurable by
water.
amps. Yeah.
Just like water. They even call it
like water.
current, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. Instead of a waterfall, you have voltage.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. All of the analogies are there. This is very important to get your head around this because when you are dealing, and this is really verging on the law of seven, but I think it's important to understand some of the basic terminology. But when you get down to it, you can identify things from one octave to another based on their similarities. This is what the whole theurgic practices is all about, you know, magic, abracadabra. It's what it's all about, right? If you want to invoke a Martian influence, for example, some sort of red elemental, if you will, a Martian influence, then you go collect things that are not just symbolic, but have an octave radiation affinity with it. And so you get an iron sword, right? Or any bit of iron. You go get geraniums. You go get, you know, a ram, you get a ruby, you get, you know, all of these things, you gather them all together so that you are creating this tuning fork principle of the Martian influence in your atmosphere, you see? And then you can do a Martian thing with it. That's all magic is. Doesn't have to be, you know, invoking, you know, it's really just the tuning fork principle. That's all there is to it. Yeah, cause changes in your environment based on the frequencies around you. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, hydrogen was the alchemical substitute for fire. It's very combustible. By the way, it's super curious to me. Except for carbon, except for carbon, you have gen at the end of these. So oxygen, in other words, making oxy, or nitrogen, making nitro, yeah. And hydrogen. Now, an interesting thing about, it's like, except in the case of carbon, it just occurred to me a couple of days ago that it has this inner nature that is only expressed when it's used. Yeah, if you take hydrogen and you burn it, and it goes pop, right? Poof. What remains? Water. Okay, it generates hydrogen. Yeah, but it's like it's locked up in its nature, its essence. You see, oxygen for water. Water, H2O. It has that inner nature to it. Yeah. In there. So anyway, there's all kinds of things that you can begin to play around with, and what it really leads into.
Just wanted to throw something here. I think it's not just carbon, it's also silicon that doesn't have the gen behind it. And that's the other.
There's tons of other chemicals that, or I should say elements that don't, but in the context of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen, which are like esoteric terms in this.
So is there any esoteric context for silicon at all? Because that's the.
No,
that's the
reason why
that's the
is
other.
The reason why is because it's rebranding of terms. Okay, that's what's important to understand is that carbon, oxygen, and nitrogen and hydrogen correspond to the air, earth, water, fire quadrad.
So the industrial revolution equivalent of that is what this transition is, and there isn't a need for the industrial revolution equivalent. There isn't an elemental concept that has to be sort of hidden by silicon, or there's three: there's silicon, carbon, and copper, because those all three can carry energy. Okay, got it.
Yeah. Do understand also that we're not actually talking about carbon, or even in the terms of air, earth, water, and fire. We're not talking about those. We're talking about something more fundamental. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Again, we get back to this dualistic aspect of here, where you've got hot and cold on one bar and wet and dry on another. And where these elements come from is the combinations there. So hot and dry, you've got fire. Dry and cold, you've got earth. Wet and cold, you've got water. And hot and wet, you've got air. Okay, that's where these come from, is the intersection of two aspects, or two vectors of the law of two. Well, it's really the law of three crossing, but anyway, you get the idea. Okay, so it's more fundamental than that. When an ancient said things like, well, you know, when ancients were talking, or ancient alchemists, I should say, were talking about things to do with earth, for example, the earth element, what they're really referring to is the interaction of these cold and dry aspects. I mean, it's in our four seasons too, isn't it? Right? You've got, let's see, hot and dry, you've got summer. Dry and cold, you've got autumn. Cold and wet, you've got winter. And warm and hot, wet and hot, you've got spring. It's all the same thing. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're just terms. So it doesn't matter if you use carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, air, earth, water, fire, wet, hot, wet, cold, so on and so forth. It's all the same thing. You're looking for the essence behind it. Okay. All right, let's go back to the idea of octaves for a moment. We've talked about this triad, haven't we, of time, space, and matter, or time, space, and information, or time, space, and energy, right? Those three are interchangeable. But what would it look like from the standpoint of something like up here at the level of C, SI, C, sidereal, universal level? Would that neutralizing vector really look like information, matter, or energy? Or would it look something more like love? That's my question. How would you experience it there? And in fact, if you think of something like matter, energy, or information from the standpoint of something like love, you can see that they both are two octaves of the same thing from the standpoint of affinity. Right? Information has an affinity for knowledge. Matter has an affinity for itself. Energy has an affinity for all three. It's all the same thing, right? But do you see this kind of connective relationship? If you think of it in terms of love as the creational aspect of the neutralizing vector, then you've got the universal absolute, or the universal Godhead, right? You've got the universal you, or self, and what connects the two is love. Yeah, this love for one another. Again, this is an aspect of development. Getting out of the information or matter or energy phase into something more love-based. But cosmically so, I mean, you know, you can take it from the standpoint of a man and a lady, and what neutralizes them can be carnal love. Yeah, they come together physically, carnal love. And then the vector changes. If they bear a child, then it becomes father, mother, child, right? It's a totally different triad. And it just keeps rotating. It's not like you can take the law of three in isolation and say, this is positive, this is negative, and this is neutral, because it really depends on the relationship. And this is the reason why humans on the planet in the past have been referred to as mankind, even though there's male and female. It's because we are active compared to the planet herself, right? We're more we're more active than the planet from a aggression and masculinity standpoint. Even the ladies are hot compared to the planet. Yeah, important concept. So Knight, I'm kind of picking you out on this one.
No, it's fine.
Specifically because you're really hot on the tail of,
Yeah.
or hot on the trail, I should say, of the law of three.
Yes.
And it's very easy to take a very static approach to it. You have to
Yes.
condition it by saying, in this situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Take bread, for example. Okay. You've got the flour in its most essential form. Flour being the, well, you can look at it as the negative vector. Fire is the positive vector, and the water is the neutralizing vector. But then when you make bread, then you've got the human becomes negative, or actually it changes, doesn't it? Right? The human wants bread, and so it goes and seeks bread. It's active at that point in time. Once it gets the bread, and the bread is passive, right? Once it gets the bread becomes active in the mouth because it starts a process of digestion, which is negative in correlation to the bread. You see, triads within triads within triads. It's always rotating. So try not to get fixed in this. This is positive. This is negative. This is neutral. It's it'll lead you down a rabbit hole that you can't escape from. Okay. There you go.
Can I just put something in there about the third, the other three? Yeah. What I've come to about it so far is there's I can see two kinds of example with it. I can see one example where you've got two vectors that are easy to see. As an example, yes and no.
Yeah.
And what you might call the third vector there, which if you're going to make any progress in yes or let's say I wake up tomorrow morning and the garden needs digging.
And what?
Part of me said the garden needs digging.
Yeah.
So one part of me says, yes, I've got to do it. Part of me says, no, it's raining. But then Jenny says to me, if we don't get it done, we can't have any carrots.
Sure.
So she comes in with a reason, and that reason is going to neutralize the no vector and how to go with my boots on.
Yeah, right. So I get that.
So what's happened is there's a yes and no vector, which we can interact with, and a third unseen, almost like transcendent. It's a reason. It's a presence. It's something that's come in. Now that's one kind of example, and there's lots of examples of those. It's really fascinating to try and pick out what the third vector might be.
Yes.
But there's another example where it appears as though the triology is intact. An example that would be in your eye, the iris, the pupil, and the cornea.
Right. Do you know the difference? The difference is a matter of perspective. It's the same thing, but the difference is a matter of perspective. We said before that the brain lives here. The brain lives in the neutral vector. Okay, this is why it's difficult to see. Have you ever heard the expression, the fish is the last to know it's in the fishbowl?
Right.
Right. It's because it's already in that ecology. It can't see that it is that. Right. I suppose the water is the last to know that it's water. Okay.
Right.
The brain life lives in the neutral vector between opposites. And so the reason why it's so difficult to see is because it's looking for itself. Really what it's looking for is itself. But what it tends to do is look everywhere else but itself. Okay.
Right.
So you can say, and you said Jenny, right?
Yes.
Jenny says,
yes.
Yeah, Jenny says, go out and pick the carrots. Well, you could just as easily say, no, thank you. Right. And there's your neutral vector anyway. So it actually happened within you, not because of Jenny coming and saying we won't have carrots, but because something in you processed the outcome there and went, right, I got to go pick the carrots and I got to go dig in the garden. But it happened in you, not outside of you.
Right.
That's the difference. Now, when you're looking at the eye, it's easy to abstract it because you think of it as separate from you and you say, oh yeah, right, my eye or his eye or her eye. And you can see the whole because you're looking at it like this. But when you're looking at internal processes, you forget about what processes it. That's the neutral vector always.
Okay.
Yeah. Now the neutral vector can be influenced by something. In this case, Jenny comes in and becomes the positive vector, not the neutral, becomes the positive and says, here's the result. Here's the outcome. You go into a triangle in your own self and you neutralize it in one way or the other. And that creates another triad of you either staying indoors or going out and picking carrots.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Just yeah, look inside if you can't find it outside.
Yeah. Okay. What I wondered was if you've got three things that are apparently intact.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think of another example of it actually. Let's say, oh no, Sun, Planet, Moon may be a bit of a bad example because that's part of a bigger octave.
No, that's 3 octaves actually. It is a bad example because it's actually 3 octaves. If you wanted,
right.
you would say Sun, all planets, Earth.
Right.
Or Moon, planet, all planets.
Right.
That's a triad.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So there you've got what appears to be a completion. There's no hidden third vector. And what I wondered was, is that a sign that something's already evolved?
The mere existence of it is a sign that all three are all three are present.
Right.
You can't have anything manifest in this universe without those three things coming together at a certain point in space-time.
Okay. Yeah.
Ask it again. I didn't answer your question well.
It's if you've got three things that form a trilogy. I'm trying to give another example.
Oh, right. Okay, I'm with you now. Okay.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's evolved. It means that it is either in the ray of evolution or the ray of degradation.
Ah.
It means it's on one of those paths, that it's not in the middle. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I'd say it's not evolved yet. I'd say it's aware that there is more than its current existence possible.
Yeah.
It's in the process of evolution, maybe.
Absolutely. This is triangles evolving into new triangles. A great example is what just happened here. All right. When I said ask again, I don't think I answered your question. What happened in me was that I wasn't able to neutralize this situation. Right. You asked a question. I became passive. The question entered me and it went through a triangle. Okay. And I came up with the neutral vector came up with information. Right. I went receptive. I neutralized it in myself, transmitted it back to you, in which case you became receptive. You weren't able to neutralize it, which I saw in your eyes. You transmitted that through your look back to me, and I became receptive, re-neutralize it, cast it back out again. That's the idea, behind triangles. Triangles within triangles within triangles. Everywhere. I find it curious that there are 3 fundamental laws, and one of them is the law of 3. It's almost like self-serving, isn't it? Right? You've got the law of unity, the law of 7, and the law of 3, and the law of 3 just happens to be make possible the fact of there being 3 laws. It's I think that kind of sentiment would belong to the maintenance ray of creation.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. This kind of self-reciprocation. Mm-hmm. What other questions have you all? Has it been useful? It's just kind of like a wide open introduction to the law of 3, get you on the territory of it. You really should ponder this idea that information has mass. You really should. That it's the same thing, and that information is carried by photons, by light, and that light is timeless and spaceless. it'll give you a deep sense of awe and wonder about where your expression of intelligence can come from, what you're able to connect to, where those things can come from. I had this idea the other day. Knight, you'll appreciate this because of your mathiness. Yeah, is that a word? Mathiness?
Mathiness.
What if you, okay, so what if you take that terabyte hard drive and encrypt it? Yeah. Now, they say that an encryption should be indistinguishable from white noise, right? You look at a hard drive, the surface of a hard drive, and one's made with white noise, the other one's encrypted. If the crypto algorithm is not broken, then they should be indistinguishable from one another. So now, where did the information go? I think it went to the key. And then I have another idea that if I write down the symmetric encryption key on a piece of paper and then rip it in half and throw it in the fire, well, not throw it in the fire because that's cheating, but rip it in half, right? So it's illegible. Would it release photons? Yeah, because if the information goes from the hard drive to the encryption key, that's what makes it viable. Actually, I think it splits between the two. But then this piece of paper with my encryption key should also release photons when I tear it in half. Weird concept. I don't know if it's true or not, but it would seem to add up. Yeah, if information has mass.
Because this is kind of similar to the cosmic microwave background radiation. Like by encrypting it, we make it diffuse enough. We make it spread out enough that it becomes unless you put more energy, unless you put more thought around it, it becomes undecipherable.
Yeah.
Unless you put the thought needed to bring all of that diffuse information together by running another algorithm on it to get all those pieces of information in a way that you can understand it, it's not usable.
Right. Yeah. It becomes noise, doesn't it?
Becomes white noise. Yep.
Zillard. Who's heard of Zillard? This is really, really curious, okay? S-Z-I-L-L-A-R-D, not to be confused with lizard, which I'm sure he got a lot of when he was a kid. The Zillard engine. He proposed this, where you have one particle, one gas particle in a chamber that's under pressure, in other words, able to do work. And as it sits, it can't do any work because it's inside of a cylinder. But this particle tends to move around, right? According to probabilities and everything else in quantum physics, it can be somewhere, anywhere. Now, you take what's called Maxwell's demon, right? From what was his first name? Can't think of it, but Maxwell, famous physicist. You take Maxwell's demon, who is like this observer that can detect where this one atom is. Let's say that he sees it over here. He immediately puts a partition in between and replaces this with a piston, okay? Then he removes the partition, and as it expands into here, it pushes the piston out of the chamber. Now, what this shows is, or this thought experiment, because we can't do it physically, obviously, but what this thought experiment shows is that information is actually energy, right? You could think, oh my goodness, this is a perpetual motion machine, a free energy machine, but it's not, because it takes an observer to be able to know which side, which half of the chamber the atom is on, to suddenly realize that information, quickly put a partition in, replace this bit over here, take it back out so that it's able to expand that part, or that piston. The information was the energy that drove the motor, you see. And if information equals energy, then energy and mass are the same, then information has mass. Fun to think about these things. It's how I'm wired. I love it. Yeah. Have you heard of that, Knight? That no?
Never heard of that concept at all. No, no.
Yeah, Zillard's engine. Cool thought experiment. I'm inclined to end here. I hope I've inspired you all a little bit to go track down a bit more about the law of three.
Definitely.
Don't go read about it. Go experience it in your life, and hopefully you can attract those bits of intelligence to yourself.
I've got a file that I put together a bit of a file. It's like a PowerPoint, but it's full of examples. And it's got some diagrams that show the rotation of positive, negative, and neutral. I'm happy to share it if it gets people going with it. Sure.
I mean, you're welcome to actually post it in the general category on the website if you want.
Okay, if that's okay with you, Pierce. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. You all are welcome to post there. It's not just me.
Please don't regard it as any final criteria. It's just me having given some examples, trying to work with it a little bit.
Yeah, don't worry about dismissing it. I mean, that's all I'm doing in these meetings also. This isn't like the truth according to Pierce or final say. We're getting together and enjoying ourselves with this process.
Yeah, I'll upload it, Pierce, if that's okay then.
Yeah, great. Okay. Do it. All right. All right. Anything else?
No? I think in 2 weeks' time, the UK forwards its clocks.
You're right. Last Sunday of March, isn't it?
Yeah. So we should be back to normal again.
Yeah. What happened to the hour, right? Now we're just a little bit closer. If time and space are never mind. That means that we're closer, doesn't it?
Yes.
If the time change between us is now 6 hours instead of 7, then our continents must have shifted to accommodate.
Yes. Apologies for my distraction down here. It's my turn by the wood burning stove.
Oh, I see. Nice.
So
I thought maybe you were petting a cat. Yeah, keep chucking it in there. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.